Is there a secret formula for building lasting wealth? Why do some people achieve financial security while others constantly struggle? And how can you make money while you sleep? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 10th episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. So today we're in day 3 of the 31-day money challenge, and this is when we start to roll up our sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty. Today we're going to talk about what I really think is the foundation of understanding what financial freedom is and how you achieve it. And I'll say right up front that there are no secrets. There's no hidden formula. There's no magic to it. I hear from time to time commercials, usually late night infomercials or crazy things on the internet where someone has cracked the code to wealth. And I always cringe when I hear that. There's no question they're selling something. It's usually some silly newsletter or information kit that they're getting folks to buy. There really is no secret. How you create and build wealth is very simple to understand. It's not always easy to do, but it's simple to understand. There really are no secrets, and we'll talk about that today. Before we get into the substance of the show, though, let me give a quick shout out to our 2 sponsors. The first is Betterment. Betterment's an online platform that invests your money in both stock and bond ETFs. You just pick the percentage you want in each, and Betterment does the rest. In addition, it rebalances and reinvests your dividends automatically. You can check them out at betterment.com. And our second sponsor is Personal Capital. They offer a free online tool where you can aggregate all of your investments, both retirement and non-retirement. You can track them. You can understand your asset allocation and fees. And this is all available for you at personalcapital.com. I use both Betterment and Personal Capital, have for quite some time, and I'm very happy with what they offer. So as I said, building wealth is simple. It's not always easy, but it's simple. And in fact, anyone that has built any meaningful wealth or financial security or financial freedom has done it. They've all done it the same way. And it's simply this: you spend less than you make, and you invest the difference wisely. Now, that may at first seem like an oversimplification, and immediately you might say, well, no, wait a minute. There are some people that just make a fortune. That's true. There certainly are. But if they're going to achieve financial freedom, if they're going to build lasting wealth, they still have to spend less than they make, and they have to invest the difference wisely. And in fact, there are plenty of examples of folks that have made millions of dollars and end up dead broke. I mean, there are plenty of examples of professional athletes that during their career made millions, and years and maybe decade after they've retired, they're just flat broke. Not long ago, there was a big story about Ed McMahon, who was, of course, the sidekick for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. He no doubt made millions during his career, and ended up, when he died, he had hundreds of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, and they were foreclosing on his home. He was flat broke. And so, there are people that make millions, but it doesn't change the fact that if you're going to build lasting wealth, if you're going to achieve financial freedom, you have to spend less than you make, and you have to invest the difference wisely. The good news there is that you don't have to make a lot of money to achieve financial security. I think often of my grandmother, who passed away many years ago, but she was a nurse at a small hospital in Ohio. And as a nurse, she made a relatively modest income. But she spent less than she made, and she invested the difference wisely. She had a home that she had paid for, had been paid off. She had saved money and invested for her retirement, and she was able to retire and have a very nice retirement. And she's someone, again, who didn't make a lot of money, but she followed this simple path. She spent less than she made, and she invested the difference wisely. If you've listened to my podcast with Mr. Money Mustache, which is podcast number 7. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. You can go to DoughRoller.net/podcast7. That's podcast followed by the number 7, he kind of takes this whole idea to the extreme. To say that he spent less than he made is an understatement. As you'll hear there, he was saving about 65% of his take-home pay. So in that case, that was sort of extreme saving. And that may not be for everyone, but you can certainly listen to his story. And I've heard great response to that podcast. Folks, even if they're not perhaps going to that extreme, they found it very inspirational. But it still comes down to the same thing, whether you want to retire early or not, whether you make a little bit of money or whether you make a lot of money. It still comes down to spending less than you make and investing the difference. In fact, that's even true for lottery winners. Or folks that inherit a lot of money. You may come into a lot of money, but if you don't hold on to it and invest it wisely, you'll eventually lose it all. And the newspapers are filled with stories of lottery winners who, given a few years, maybe a decade, they eventually blow everything that they've won and they end up destitute. So in today's podcast, with that in mind, spending less than you make and investing the difference wisely, I want to talk about something that I think is extremely important, and I think everyone should do it, and it's this: to prepare what's called a net worth statement. So let's talk about first what it is. We're going to talk about how to prepare it and why it's important. So what is a net worth statement? It's simply a list of all of your assets and all of your liabilities. And you can simply take your assets, subtract your liabilities or your debts, and the result is your net worth. So, for example, if you had $200,000 in assets and $100,000 in debt, your net worth would be $100,000. Now, you can have a negative net worth, right? You can be in a situation where your debts exceed your assets. That was my situation when I graduated from law school. My wife and I had virtually nothing to our names, and I had about $55,000 in school loans. So we had a negative net worth when we started out. But that's what a net worth statement is. It's very easy to prepare. I track my net worth in an Excel spreadsheet, and I update it monthly. So what it is simple. There are some different ways to prepare a net worth statement, though, and that's what I want to focus on. And I'm going to suggest a way to prepare your net worth statement that will help you with the goal that I want to achieve in this episode, and as we move through the 31-day money challenge. And it's this: I want to create a net worth statement that can help you track your progress as you move towards financial freedom. It will help you track your progress as you pay off debt, as you save for retirement, as you save for an emergency fund, as you save for your child or children's education. So when I put together a net worth statement, I'm always asking, what's the purpose of it? Why are we doing this? That's the purpose of it today. There are other reasons, of course, to prepare a net worth statement. When I get a loan for rental properties, for example, that I invest in with a business partner, the bank wants a net worth statement. Well, I prepare it differently than what I'm going to describe for you today, and I'll explain why in a minute. So it's important to understand why you want to prepare a net worth statement. In this case, again, it's to track our progress. When you think about net worth, your assets, and your debts, really, a net worth statement kind of summarizes all of your finances up to the date that you prepare the net worth statement. I mean, our net worth statement really is the result of, in my wife and mine's case, 25 years of living, right, of making money, hopefully saving some of it and investing it. And the result of all of that can be boiled down to a single piece of paper with our assets and our liabilities. So how do we prepare it? Well, let's start with the assets. One approach is to literally list every asset that you own. So that would, of course, include your home, your cars, all of your furniture, jewelry, clothing, all your personal possessions, and then as well as all of your cash, your bank accounts, your investments, both in retirement and non-retirement, things like your 401k and your IRA, any businesses you own, and of course, something like rental income. Now, for our purposes, though, I don't include all of those assets. What I include on my net worth statement are only assets that either over time appreciate in value and or generate income. So, for example, I would include my home because, notwithstanding the recent crash in real estate, over the long term, real estate goes up in value. I would include my cash in the bank, of course, as it earns interest. I would include our retirement accounts, 401k and IRAs, as well as our taxable accounts. In my case, I also include the rental properties that I own. What I don't include, though, are things like cars because they don't generate any income and they go down in value. I don't include any personal possessions like clothing or furniture. And I exclude all of those because the purpose of the net worth statement that I track and that I think you should track is to gauge my progress towards financial freedom. And while we need cars and we need clothes and we need furniture, these things in and of themselves don't help us move towards financial freedom. They don't generate any income that we could live off of, for example. They don't appreciate in value such that we could later sell them for a profit. In fact, with a car, eventually it's going to depreciate down to nothing, and you're going to sell it for trade it in for very little and start all over with a new car. So I know that in some cases folks will suggest that you include all of this in a net worth statement. I don't think you should for this purpose. For one thing, it makes preparing a net worth statement a little more complicated. But again, it doesn't help us with the reason we're preparing this in the first place, and that is to track our progress towards financial freedom, to track our progress for getting out of debt, and to track our progress for increasing our investments and improving our investments, growing our 401k, growing our IRAs. So I don't include any of those things that depreciate and don't generate income. Now, again, if I were going to prepare a net worth statement to give to a bank to get a loan, I would include all of those things, and it would be appropriate to do so. But in this case, again, I'm suggesting you only include assets that either appreciate over time and/or generate income. And in my case, I'm looking at my net worth statement now. I only have a few items actually on my balance sheet in terms of assets. I have cash, which for me would be basically anything in the bank. So it'd be checking accounts, savings accounts. I don't happen to own any certificates of deposit, but if I did, I would include those. So that all goes into the category of cash. And then for me, I separate out taxable investments from retirement investments. So my retirement investments I group together, and that would include my 401k at my current job, as well as I have a couple of different IRAs. I have a rollover IRA, which comes from 401ks from previous employers that after I left, rolled over into an IRA. I also have a SEP IRA, which is for the self-employed. And then I have what's called an inherited IRA, which was some retirement investments that I inherited from a relative who passed away. So again, I have cash, I have taxable investments, I have retirement investments. Then I have a line for the rental properties I own with a business partner. And what I do there is I group them all together, I take the value of the properties, and I'll explain how I determine that in a minute. And for rental properties, I just subtract out what we owe in mortgages and then report the difference. That's not how I handle my home, but for rental properties, it's just easier to do it that way. I could just list all of the values as assets and all of the mortgages as liabilities, but it just made, for me, the net worth statement a little easier to read. And then the last thing I have in terms of assets is our home. And the way I calculate the value of our home is I just use Zillow. I think most people are probably familiar with Zillow. If you're not, I'll leave a link to it in the show notes. But it will give you what they call a zestimate of your home. And I've found in my experience that Zillow, and I don't know if perhaps this is just because of where we live, or maybe this is your experience as well. Zillow tends to underestimate, in my view, the value of the property. Now, sometimes I think we can think that our homes are worth more than they are. So, maybe there's an argument that I overestimate the value, but I don't think so. I think Zillow underestimates the value, but I use it anyway, and I do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's objective. I just go into Zillow each month, look at the value, put it on my balance sheet or my net worth statement. The other thing is that if I go to sell the home, we're certainly going to have fees, particularly if we use a realtor. We'll have 5 or 6% just in realtor fees, and then there'll be other fees on top of that. So I kind of view the value that Zillow provides as sort of the net amount that we would receive if we ever sold our home after all of those fees. So that's what I use for our home. That's what I use for the rental properties. And that's it for me. Again, cash, taxable investments, retirement investments, rental properties, and our home. That's it. Now, yours might be a little more complicated, maybe less so, but it's very easy to track. I have to track just five line items each month. And so those are all the assets. Now, what about liabilities? Well, liabilities are all the debts that you owe. So it would include, of course, a home mortgage if you have a mortgage, a home equity line of credit, credit cards, car loans, school loans, any other sort of unsecured debt that you have, everything. Now, in this case, you can group them together that way. If you have multiple credit card debt, you could group it all as one item. When we get to later shows in this series, when we talk about getting out of debt, it'll be important to break that out in more detail. But for purposes of your net worth statement, it's probably not necessary, although it's up to you. You could do it either way. But to create a separate line item for every single one, it might be fine to group them together. One thing, though, I would say is if you have credit card debt but you pay it off in full every month, I don't bother with that. I mean, we use our credit cards every month for most of our spending because it's convenient and it's secure. I think of things like the data breach at Target that was recently reported, and it makes me glad that we use credit cards versus our debit card because they're far more secure. But if you have credit card debt and you pay it in full each month, at least I don't bother putting that on the net worth statement because it goes to zero at the end of every month. So in our case, our only debt is our mortgage. And so that's listed on our net worth statement. And then, of course, we just take all our assets and add them up and then subtract our liabilities. And that gets us our net worth. And it's really as simple as that. The net worth statement that I'm looking at now, I track it monthly. And I've done this since, at least 10 years. And I have my net worth statements going back all the way, I think, to 2003. And it's kind of fun to look at it and see what progress we've made. Some years have been better than others. Sometimes we may have taken a step backward. Hopefully, we're taking a step forward. One of the things I find about tracking the net worth is that it's motivational. I mean, it allows you to see as you slowly are getting out of debt, as you're slowly building your assets, as your net worth hopefully is slowly or sometimes maybe quickly rising. But the key is you need to track it. And as I said, it's very easy to do. I would say each month I spend, probably 15 or 20 minutes to prepare the net worth statement. Now, so that's how you prepare it. Now I want to talk a little bit about why. As I mentioned just a second ago, it is motivational to kind of just to see where you stand. But I think it's a lot more, there's some issues here that are a lot more important than just motivation. And for that, I want to go back to the 3 questions I asked at the start of the show. Do you remember what they were? They were, is there a secret formula for building lasting wealth? The answer is no. We've already covered that, right? Spend less than you make, invest the difference wisely. Why do some people achieve financial security while others constantly struggle? And how can you make money while you sleep? Well, I want to revisit those questions in light of the net worth statement. If you think about the net worth statement, that you've got assets and you've got liabilities. Again, in our case, the assets are only those that either go up in value and or generate income, right? We're not including the cars and the boats and the jet skis and the clothes and the furniture. And what that means is that every single asset on my net worth statement generates income for me. And we may not always think of it that way. When we think about income, we think about going to the job 9 to 5 and making a salary or an hourly wage. Or we think about maybe if we're self-employed, the freelancing work that we do or the business that we run. But the fact of the matter is, as you work and earn money and spend less than you make, and then take that money and invest it, again, whether it's in a taxable investment, a retirement investment, rental property, those assets are generating income for you 24/7. When you're awake, when you're asleep, when you're on vacation. I kind of view every dollar that I put to work for me and my family as an employee. And I want that dollar to work very hard, whether it's in a mutual fund, a rental property, whatever. So when I look at my balance sheet and I see those assets are generating on a monthly basis income. Now, it's true sometimes the stock market goes down and the total value of my investment goes down for a period. But having done this now for 25 years, I know, and having read a lot about the history of investments, that over the long run, they go up in value and they do generate income. Now, that's assets generating income. That's good, right? What about liabilities? Well, liabilities are the exact opposite. Liabilities generate for us expenses. And they generate those expenses, of course, in the form of interest. Even my home mortgage, which has a relatively low interest rate, we pay 3 7/8 on a 30-year fixed mortgage, which is really phenomenal. Certainly by historic standards, I wonder, if we'll ever see interest rates that low in my lifetime, but who knows? But it's still generating an interest expense. Even given that it's tax deductible, it's still generating an interest expense that we have to pay every month. And the same is true with credit card debt, school loans, car loans. They're all generating expenses. And we pay those expenses every month when we make the payments on our debt. And this is where I think we see the difference. And again, I go back to one of the first questions I asked at the beginning of the show. Why do some people achieve financial security while others constantly struggle? And I think those that achieve financial security, they learn somewhere, hopefully early, but sometimes late, that financial security comes from making more than you spend and taking that difference and putting it into income producing and appreciating investments on your balance sheet. And as those investments generate income, whether it's dividends or interest or rental payments, and you take that money, what do you do with it? It's technically income. You could actually record that income on your budget each month. But if you take it and reinvest it, right, you put it back into more assets, you take the dividends and you reinvest them into stocks and stock mutual funds, you take your rental income and you either buy more properties with it, or you pay down the mortgage on the rental property, or you take it and improve the property so that you can increase rents. All of these things work to increase your assets, increase the value of your investments, and it becomes a cycle. Your assets produce income, you reinvest that income into your investments, which then produce more income, right? It's called compounding. And over a given enough period of time, you'll actually find that your assets are generating income and it's compounding. And particularly if you start early, you'll end up generating far more income from your balance sheet than you do from your 9-to-5 job. Now, that takes some time. That, to me, is really sort of the ultimate in financial freedom. But for some people, the reverse happens. We start to spend a little more than we should. We start to spend a little more than we make. We make up the difference through credit cards. That credit card debt causes us to pay more in interest, more in minimum payments. That makes spending less than we make even more difficult, right? So we end up charging more, and we go through this sort of death spiral as we end up generating more and more debt, which then generates more and more interest expense. Now, what I'm describing is nothing new. And in fact, if you've ever read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, you've read this basic concept. And I would encourage you to go to the show notes for this episode, which you'll find at DoughRoller.net/podcast 10. That's podcast followed by the number 10, because I'm going to have some diagrams there that visually show you what I'm talking about. In some ways, it's somewhat difficult to describe, and sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that I recommend, I'm not as fond of some of his later books, but I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad is worth reading, even if you're not interested in real estate investing, which is his focus. But it really does show you the importance of understanding your net worth statement and how by spending less than you make and in making the right investments with your money, you can begin to generate significant income from your investments, passive income. This is income, again, that it's getting generated not by the sweat of your brow, not because you're getting up at 5 in the morning and going to work, but because your assets, your investments are working for you 24/7. And in his book, he basically compares, using his language, his rich dad and his poor dad. The rich dad is taking income, making good investments, building up the assets on his balance sheet, which is in turn generating more income. His poor dad is living beyond his means, spending more than he should, not having extra income to make sound investments, and instead going into more debt, going into getting car loans, credit card debt, which is generating more and more interest expense, and then it just compounds. And I really want you to keep this in mind as we work through this, continue to work through the 31-Day Money Challenge, because just about everything we talk about, everything in personal finance and everything in investing relates to this concept. It relates to your net worth statement on the one hand, your assets and your liabilities, what you own and what you owe, and your monthly budget on the other, your income that you're generating and your expenses. And if you think about the different topics in personal finance and investing, budgeting, for example, why do we budget? To help us spend less than we make, so that we can then invest the difference wisely. How about something like a credit score? What could a credit score have to do with all of this? Well, a good credit score will allow you to borrow money at a lower interest rate, so you'll be paying less interest on, for example, a mortgage, which will help you, again, spend less than you make. A good credit score also reduces the premium you pay on car insurance, which reduces that expense, again, makes it easier to spend less than you make. And of course, all of the issues surrounding investing in 401ks and IRAs for retirement, investing in taxable accounts, and in mutual funds, stock mutual funds, bond mutual funds, all of these things relate to building up the assets on your net worth statement. The same would be true with investing in real estate. Everything relates to this concept that I'm describing about your net worth statement. It all relates to spending less than you make and investing the difference wisely. It all comes down to that key principle, and it's something that you need to understand. And again, I think the best way to see it visually is to prepare your net worth statement. Depending on where you are financially, you may not like what you see, but take it from someone who started with a negative net worth. I know what it's like. But the good thing will be as you start to climb out of that, you get to zero, you keep moving from there, you will see the progress. Now, in the show notes to this episode, I will leave a number of links. I'll leave a link to the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, which again, I do think is worth reading if you haven't read it. I'm also going to leave links to some net worth statements, some templates that you can use if you'd like. I mean, in my case, I just open up a blank Excel spreadsheet. It's no frills, no color involved. There's nothing fancy, but there are some Excel templates that you can use if you'd like. That makes it very easy, and I will again leave links to those in the show notes. So your homework today is 1, to prepare your net worth statement. That's the first thing. And 2 is, as you begin to make financial decisions, as we work our way through the 31-Day Money Challenge, as you start to think about getting out of debt, as you start to think about budgeting, as you start to think about investing for retirement, start to ask yourself, how will this affect my net worth? This can come in handy when you start to answer questions about, should you pay off debt first or should you invest first, a topic we will cover this month. How should you tackle your debt? Which debt should you pay off first? Should you invest for retirement first or your child's education? How much should you have in an emergency fund? Now, you may have noticed that I started with the net worth statement today, not budgeting. As important as budgeting is, I really wanted to begin with what I think is the foundation for creating wealth. And to me, as I guess is clear now because I've repeated it, but financial freedom, true wealth is found on the balance sheet, on your net worth statement. It's not found in your paycheck. Obviously, how much money you make matters, but I know wealthy people who have no financial freedom, wealthy in the sense of a big income, big lifestyle. So I wanted to start with the net worth statement so that we could focus on assets and liabilities. And when you think about some of the key financial goals a lot of people have, they're all on the balance sheet. I mean, sure, you want to get a promotion. Sure, you'd like to make a lot of money. But what are the key financial goals? Well, one is getting out of debt. So that's on your net worth statement. One is maxing out your 401k or your IRA. Again, That's on your net worth statement. Another one is saving an emergency fund in cash, again, on your net worth statement. So I wanted to start with that because it's so important to sort of the foundation of everything that we're doing. But of course, budgeting is critical because we've got to figure out a way to make more than we spend, and that's where budgeting comes in. And that's what we're going to tackle tomorrow. So that brings this episode to a close. As always, you can find the show notes at DoughRoller.net/podcast 10. And as I said, that's really important here. I'll have some diagrams that I think help explain your net worth statement and how it relates to your budget. You can leave a voicemail message for me that with questions and comments that I'll play on a future podcast. You can do that at speakpipe.com/DoughRoller. You can email me, dr@DoughRoller.net. I read every email and respond to every email. I'm getting a lot of great questions at both SpeakPipe and through email that I'll be responding to over the course of the 31-Day Money Challenge. You can subscribe to the podcast. Just go to DoughRoller.net/iTunes. That'll redirect you to where this podcast resides. You can subscribe or leave a review. And you can sign up for our newsletter. Just go to DoughRoller.net/newsletter. It's free. We send out a newsletter every week, Saturday at 8 p.m. So with that, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.